The star was dead. It had been dead for so long that even its light was gone. No warmth. No glow. Just a cold, black mass sitting at the center of a forgotten corner of the galaxy. Around it, broken rocks drifted in slow circles. Dust floated in silence. Nothing moved with purpose. Nothing lived here. Nobody came here either. That was exactly why the Galactic Council sent the endless inquiry to scan it. Not because they expected to find something, but because they had already scanned everywhere else. The endless inquiry was not a glamorous ship. It was long and gray and shaped like a stretched bone. Its hull was covered in sensor plates and scanner dishes. No weapons. No soldiers. Just instruments, data banks, and a crew of 23 researchers who spent most of their days recording emptiness and filing reports that nobody read. Navigator Vreel was used to that. She sat at her station on the bridge, her 4 arms moving slowly across the control panel. She had 6 eyes, 3 on each side of her narrow face, and right now, 4 of them were half closed. This was her 3rd deep scan of the sector. The first 2 had shown nothing. This one would show nothing too. She was almost sure of it. The scanner hummed. Data rolled across her screen in long columns of numbers. Rock composition. Gravitational readings. Radiation levels. All normal. All boring. All exactly what she expected from a dead star system that had not hosted life in millions of years. Then, a ping. Small. Clean. Sharp. Vreel's eyes opened. All 6 of them. She looked at the reading. Then she looked again. Then she sat up straight in her chair and told herself she was misreading the data. She ran the scan a second time. The ping came back. Same location. Same size. Same impossible reading. Something solid was inside the large asteroid at the edge of the system. Not just solid, constructed. The scanner was detecting straight lines. Right angles. Smooth surfaces. Things that did not happen naturally inside a rock. Something had been built in there. Vreel called the captain. Captain Doss arrived on the bridge still rubbing sleep from his gray-scaled face. He was an older Thranari, a species that lived long but aged slowly. His scales had faded from dark green to ash gray over the centuries. His eyes were sharp though. Always sharp. He looked at Vreel's screen, and those sharp eyes went very still. He did not speak for almost 2 full minutes. Then he whispered, "Run the age estimate." Vreel had already done it. She turned the screen toward him so he could see the number clearly. Estimated age, 1.1 million years. Dawes stared at that number. Then he looked at the structural readings again, the straight lines, the smooth walls, the chambers carved deep inside the asteroid with perfect precision. "That cannot be right," he said. "I ran it 4 times, Vreel said quietly. By then, the rest of the bridge crew had gathered. Nobody had been called. They just came. Word travels fast on a small ship, especially when something strange happens in a place where nothing strange is supposed to happen. The ship's AI ran a comparison check, searching its entire database for any known civilization that could have built a structure like this, in this location, 1 million years ago. The search took 3 minutes. Then the result appeared on the main screen in simple, flat text. Origin, unknown. Someone in the back of the room made a low sound. Not quite a word. Just the sound a person makes when their brain refuses to accept what their eyes are reading. Dawes straightened up. He told Vreel to move the ship closer. Slowly. As the endless inquiry drifted toward the asteroid, the long-range visual scanner began to pick up detail on the surface. At first it looked like normal rock, cracked and pitted and old. But then the image sharpened. And they saw it. Carvings. Not random. Not decorative. Deliberate. Deep. Cut into the rock with something powerful enough to carve stone like soft clay. The same symbol, repeated over and over and over, covering the entire surface of the asteroid from one side to the other. Thousands of repetitions. Maybe tens of thousands. Whatever made this wanted the message to be seen from far away. Wanted it to be impossible to miss. The ship's translator began working on the symbol immediately. It was an old language, older than anything in the standard database. The AI had to dig into archived linguistic records, cross-reference dead scripts, reconstruct grammar patterns from fragments that historians had almost thrown away. It took 11 minutes. The bridge was completely silent for all 11 of those minutes. Then the translation appeared. 4 words. Simple. Clear. Written in a language that had not been spoken aloud in over 1,000,000 years, but still carried a weight so heavy that every single person on that bridge felt it land in their chest like a stone dropped into still water. Do not open. And below that, one more line. Smaller. But somehow worse. This is your only warning. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The hum of the ship's engines felt too loud suddenly. The scanner kept pinging quietly, steady, patient, as if the asteroid had been waiting a very long time for someone to finally notice it. Then, from the back of the bridge, footsteps. Slow and certain. Science Officer Sorvak stepped through the gathered crew and stopped in front of the main screen. He was young for a Cathani, only 80 years old, with smooth amber skin and bright eyes that never seemed to carry doubt. He looked at the translation. He looked at the structural readings. He looked at the age estimate. And then he smiled. "We have to know what's inside," he said. Captain Doss turned to look at him. And for the first time in a very long career, the old captain felt something he had almost forgotten. Fear. The asteroid was cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. Vril felt it the moment she stepped off the docking pod and onto the surface. Her suit's sensors said the temperature was manageable. Her suit's oxygen readings were stable. Everything by the numbers was fine. But her body did not believe the numbers. There was something about standing on the surface of this rock, with those carved warnings covering every centimeter around her boots, that made her feel like she was standing somewhere she was never supposed to be. Like walking into a room and realizing the room was watching you back. She told herself it was just nerves. She did not fully believe that either. The scout team was small. 4 of them. Vril on navigation and sensors. Sorvak leading the science work. 2 security officers named Breck and Hello, big, quiet, professional. Both of them kept their hands close to their tools without being told. They found the entry point using the structural scans from the ship. A section of rock slightly thinner than the rest, not natural, deliberately thinned, as if whoever built this place had planned for someone to cut through eventually. That detail bothered Vril more than she said out loud. You did not plan an entry point into something you never wanted opened. Unless you knew, even then, that someone would open it anyway. The cutting took 4 hours. The rock was dense and the tools ran hot. Breck had to stop twice to let the cutter cool down. Nobody talked much during those 4 hours. The warnings carved into the surface around them made conversation feel wrong somehow. Like speaking loudly in a place built for silence. When the last section of rock finally gave way, the tunnel opened up, and the 4 of them stood at the edge of the hole and looked in. A corridor stretched ahead of them. Long and straight and perfectly smooth. The walls were black, the same black material that the ship's scanners could not identify. Not painted black. Not coated. Just black all the way through, like the material itself had been grown from darkness. The floor was flat and even. The ceiling was high, higher than it needed to be for any species the galaxy currently knew. No dust. Not a single particle floating in the beam of Vril's light. After 1,000,000 years, the inside of this place was cleaner than most active research stations. That was not natural. That was maintained. Something inside this asteroid had been keeping it clean. They moved in slowly. Boots made no sound on the black floor, the material absorbed the noise completely. Their lights pushed about 30 meters ahead before the darkness swallowed everything again. The corridor went further than the lights could reach. Much further. The walls were not empty. The warning symbol from the surface was here too, carved into the black walls in rows so neat they looked printed. But as the team walked deeper, new carvings began to appear between the symbols. Longer ones. Full sentences. Sorvok read them aloud as they passed, his voice flat and clinical, like a scientist recording field notes. You were warned. 50 meters further. Turn back. This is mercy. Another 30 meters. What sleeps here must never wake. Vril stopped walking at that one. She stood in front of it and read it 3 times. Must never wake. Not should. Not might. Must. An absolute word. The kind of word you use when you are not making a suggestion. Keep moving, Sorvok said from ahead of her. She moved. But she kept thinking about that word. Must. The corridor ended after roughly 400 meters. And what waited at the end of it stopped all 4 of them completely, even Sorvok, who had not stopped for anything so far. The door was massive. It filled the entire end of the corridor from floor to ceiling and wall to wall. Vril estimated it was nearly 40 meters tall. The same black material as the walls and floor, but thicker, visibly, enormously thicker. Her scanner tried to measure the depth of it and simply returned an error. Too dense. Too deep. Whatever this door was made of, it was built to survive things that would destroy everything around it. There were no handles. No buttons. No keypad. No visible mechanism of any kind. Just a flat, seamless, endless surface of black, and at the center, at roughly chest height for a tall species, a single handprint. Pressed into the material like a stamp in warm wax. As if someone had simply pushed their hand against the door and the door had remembered it forever. 5 fingers. A wide palm. Slightly larger than most known species, but not by much. The proportions were strange. Long fingers. Defined knuckles. The print of a hand that was built for work, not for elegance. Sorvok held his own hand up next to it. 3 fingers. Narrow palm. No match. He tried anyway, pressing his hand flat against the print. Nothing happened. The door did not move. Did not hum. Did not respond in any way. Breck tried. Hello tried. Vril tried last, already knowing the answer. Nothing. Back on the ship, Captain Doss had been watching through their helmet cameras the entire time. He had already contacted the Galactic Council before the team finished cutting through the rock. The Council's response had come back fast, faster than normal, which meant someone important had seen the initial report and decided this was not a routine discovery. A full research team was being dispatched. A larger vessel. Specialists in ancient construction, energy systems, and xenolinguistics. And one specific individual that the Council had requested personally. Dr. Pella. Xenoarchaeologist. 40 years of fieldwork. The only living researcher who had dedicated her entire career to studying a civilization the academic community called the disappeared, a species that had vanished from galactic records so completely that most historians considered them a myth. She arrived 30 hours later on a fast courier ship. She was older, small, and moved with the careful precision of someone who had spent decades working in places where one wrong step could destroy something irreplaceable. The team brought her straight to the corridor feed. She stood in front of the screen and studied the handprint for a long time without speaking. Then she sat down on the floor. Just sat down. Right there. Put her head in her hands and went very still. Sorvok frowned. Dr. Pella. Do you recognize the construction style? She looked up. Her eyes were not confused. They were not uncertain. They were the eyes of someone who had spent 40 years chasing a ghost, and had just watched it walk through the door in front of her. "I know exactly who built this," she said. "Then who?" Sorvok asked. She said the word quietly. Almost gently. Like she was afraid saying it too loud might make it more real. "Humans." The corridor hummed softly around them. The warnings on the walls caught the light and held it. And somewhere behind that enormous black door, in the silence that had lasted 1,000,000 years, something kept waiting. Patient as stone. Old as stars. Nobody slept that night. The ship was quiet but not calm. Crew members sat in small groups in the common areas, speaking in low voices, looking at their screens without really reading them. The kind of restless, heavy quiet that fills a place when something has happened that everyone feels but nobody knows how to talk about yet. Dr. Pella did not sleep either. But she was not restless. She was working. Sorvok found her in the research bay 3 hours after midnight. She had pushed all the standard equipment to the edges of the room and covered the central table with her own materials. Old files printed on thin sheets. Star maps so detailed they had to be folded multiple times just to fit on the table. Photographs, hundreds of them, of ruins from planets scattered across 17 different systems. Fragments of metal. Sketches of carvings. Pages of handwritten notes in a script so small Sorvok had to lean close just to see it was writing it all. She had been building this picture for 40 years. Sorvok stood in the doorway and watched her work for a moment. Then he stepped inside and asked the question that had been sitting in his chest since she said that word and sat down on the floor. Who built it? Pella did not look up from her notes. She already knew he would come. She had expected it. "I already told you," she said. "Tell me again," Sorvok said. "Because what you said does not make sense." She looked up then. Her eyes were tired but her voice was steady. "Humans," she said. "The vault was built by humans." Sorvok pulled a chair from the wall and sat down slowly. He was quiet for a moment, not because he had nothing to say but because he was choosing his words carefully. He was a scientist. He respected evidence. He did not like dismissing things without reason. But this required reason. Humans, he said slowly, were a small species. Short. Fragile. They had a lifespan so brief that most civilizations their age were still learning basic agriculture when humans appeared, and the humans were already gone before those same civilizations built their first city. The records described them as unremarkable. A minor species that burned out quickly and left almost nothing behind. Pella nodded. "Yes," she said. "That is exactly what the records say." She let that sit for a moment. Then she added the part that changed everything. The records were changed. The room felt different after those 3 words. Smaller somehow. Quieter. Sorvok stared at her. Changed by who? "I do not know," she said honestly. "Maybe by humans themselves before they left. Maybe by something else. Maybe both. What I know is that every original source I have ever found, carvings, buried data cores, physical ruins, tells a completely different story than what the official galactic history records." She stood up and began laying photographs across the table one by one. Sorvok leaned forward to look at them. Ruins. But not the ruins of primitive settlements. The ruins of things so large they dwarfed the landscapes around them. Foundations the size of cities. Support structures still standing after hundreds of thousands of years, made of the same black material as the vault walls. Energy conduits buried so deep underground that the survey teams who found them first thought they were natural geological formations. On 17 different planets. Spread across the galaxy. "This is not the work of an unremarkable species," Pella said quietly. "This is the work of a civilization that was operating on a scale the galaxy has never seen before or since." They were not small. They were not fragile. They were extraordinary, and they made sure nobody knew it. Sorvok studied the photographs in silence. His scientific instincts were pushing back, asking for controlled data, verified sources, peer review. But his eyes were looking at ruins that should not exist and structures that should not have survived in a vault carved into an asteroid 1,000,000 years before his own species learned to travel between stars. Why, he said finally. Why would they hide what they were? Pella sat back down. She folded her hands on the table. Because of what they saw coming, she said. She pulled out a star map, old, hand-drawn on material that looked almost organic. She spread it flat and pointed to a region near the galactic core. 40 years ago I found a data core on a dead moon in this region. Buried under 2 kilometers of rock. The data was partially corrupted but enough survived to read. It was a human record, a projection. A calculation. Something their scientists built to model the future of the galaxy based on the political and military patterns they were observing. She tapped the map. The projection showed a war. Not a small war. Not a regional conflict. A galaxy-wide collapse. Every major civilization eventually pulled in, resources exhausted, populations destroyed. The calculation gave it a 91% probability of occurring within 200,000 years of the time the record was made. Sorvok was very still. And humans decided to hide because of a war that had not happened yet. No, Pella said. They hid because they knew that if they stayed, if the rest of the galaxy knew what humans were truly capable of, they would become the center of that war. Every civilization would want them as an ally. Every civilization would fear them as an enemy. Their existence would make the collapse faster. Worse. More total. She looked at him directly. So they removed themselves. Completely. They buried their ruins. They altered the records. They made themselves into a footnote, an unremarkable species that disappeared quietly, so that the galaxy would move forward without them at the center of it. Sorvok sat with that for a long time. Outside the research bay window, the asteroid drifted in the dark. Patient. Sealed. Covered in warnings written by hands that had not existed in 1,000,000 years. And the vault, Sorvok said finally. If they left, if they hid everything, why leave a vault at all? Pella was quiet for a moment. She reached into the bottom of her file stack and pulled out a single photograph. Placed it on the table in front of him. It showed a carving. Found on a dead planet near the galaxy's edge. Rough translation beneath it in Pella's small handwriting. Sorvok read it slowly. The last solution. Never use it. Never let anyone else use it. He looked up at her. Her expression answered his question before she spoke. Whatever is inside that vault, she said softly, humans built it as a last resort. Something so powerful, or so dangerous, that even they were afraid of it. They sealed it away and marked it and hoped with everything they had that nobody would ever need to open it. She glanced toward the corridor feed still playing on the wall screen. The door. The handprint. The warnings. And now, she said, your science team is outside preparing to cut through it. Sorvok did not answer. He was already standing up. Already walking toward the door. And in his bright eyes that never seemed to carry doubt, for the first time, something new had appeared. Not fear. Not hesitation. Something worse. Certainty. Captain Doss made the call at dawn, not real dawn, there was no sun here, no sky, no morning light breaking over a horizon. But the ship ran on a standard time cycle, and when the clock turned to the first hour of the working day, Doss called the entire senior crew to the bridge and told them what he had decided. They were stopping. All cutting operations. All entry attempts. Everything halted until a full review could be conducted by the Galactic Council's Safety Committee. That he said it clearly and calmly, the way he had said difficult things for 200 years of captaining ships. He expected arguments. He was prepared for them. What he was not prepared for was Sorvok. The young science officer stood at the back of the room and listened to everything the captain said without moving. Without reacting. When DOS finished, Sorvok stepped forward and placed a data tablet on the central console. On it, a direct communication from the Galactic Council's chief research director. Sent 40 minutes ago. Marked urgent and non-negotiable, the message was short: continue the operation. This discovery supersedes standard safety protocols. Full access authorized. Council authority overrides field command. DOS read it twice. His jaw tightened. His gray scales darkened slightly at the edges, the Threnari equivalent of going pale. That he looked at Sorvok for a long moment. Sorvok looked back with those bright, certain eyes. You contacted them before I made my decision, DOS said quietly. I contacted them when I knew what your decision would be, Sorvok replied. That it was not said with cruelty. Just with fact. The kind of fact that lands harder than cruelty because it cannot be argued with. DOS stepped back from the console. He did not agree. He did not approve. But he was a captain who followed structure, and the structure had just been used against him with perfect precision. The cutting resumed within the hour. The door fought them, there was no other word for it. Every tool the research team brought to bear against that black surface was met with resistance that should not have been physically possible. Standard laser cutters, the kind that could slice through reinforced ship hulls, ran at full power for 6 hours and left a mark barely deep enough to catch a fingernail. They brought in molecular drill heads. The head shattered. Not bent. Not worn down. Shattered, as if the door had simply decided it did not want to be touched and the drills had agreed. Sorvok called for heavier equipment from the storage bay. Industrial cutting frames. High-frequency plasma tools designed for deep asteroid mining. They worked slightly better. Slightly. After 12 hours of continuous operation, the team had cut roughly 4 centimeters into a door that Vreel estimated was at least 3 meters thick. At that rate, it would take months. Dr. Pella watched the progress reports from the research bay and said nothing. She had gone quiet since her conversation with Sorvok the night before. Not defeated quiet. Thinking quiet. She sat surrounded by her files and photographs and maps, and she thought with the focused stillness of someone who had spent 40 years learning how to be patient. On the second day of cutting, she requested access to the full scan data from the door's surface. She spent 14 hours studying it. Then she went to find Sorvok. She told him to bring a resonance cutter. Sorvok had heard of resonance cutters but never used one. They were rare, expensive, difficult to maintain, and powerful enough that most safety regulations kept them off standard research vessels. But this was not a standard operation anymore, and the larger supply ship that had accompanied the council team had one in its lower equipment bay. It took half a day to set up. The resonance cutter worked differently from every other tool they had tried. It did not push against the material. It vibrated it, sending precise sound frequencies into the structure at a molecular level until the bonds between particles loosened and the material separated from within rather than being forced from without. Pella had found the resonance frequency in the scan data. Hidden inside the door's molecular structure, a specific vibration pattern, present throughout the material, like a signature. Like the door had been built with its own key already inside it, waiting for someone smart enough to find it. She did not tell Sorvok that part. She was not sure he would have cared. The resonance cutter engaged on the third morning. It worked. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, a thin line appeared in the center of the door. Not a cut exactly. More like a seam revealing itself. As if the door was remembering a shape it had always had but kept hidden. The line spread. Upward and downward simultaneously. The research team gathered in the corridor behind the equipment, watching in complete silence. Vreel stood at the back of the group. She had not wanted to be here for this. She had filed a formal objection with Captain Doss 2 days ago. He had received it and replied with 2 words. Noted. Logged. Which meant nothing would change. She stayed anyway. Not because she wanted to see the door open. Because she wanted to be there for whatever came after. On the third afternoon the line reached the floor and the ceiling at the same moment. And then the cutting stopped. Not because the team stopped it. The resonance cutter was still running, still vibrating, still pushing. But the door was no longer responding to it. The seam had reached its full height and simply stopped accepting the tool's input. Sorvok stepped forward to check the equipment. Vril watched the door. And the door moved. Not dramatically. Not with a thunderous boom or a rush of ancient air. Just a slow, smooth, silent movement, the two halves of the door separating from each other and sliding apart with a precision that made the 3 years of cutting feel embarrassing by comparison. It opened because it chose to. Something on the inside had detected their entry attempt and made a decision. Let them in. The door that had resisted every tool for 3 days moved aside in 12 quiet seconds as if it had simply been waiting for the right moment. That was the detail that stopped everyone cold. Not the door. Not the darkness beyond it. Not the stale ancient air that rolled out and made their suit sensors spike with readings they had never seen before. The choice. The door had made a choice. Sorvok recovered first. He always recovered first. He stepped through the opening and his helmet light cut into the darkness ahead. The vault opened up around him like a held breath finally released. Enormous. The ceiling climbed so high his light could not find it. The space stretched in every direction further than the beam could reach. And filling that space, rows. Perfect, silent, endless rows of sealed containers. Each one identical. Each one labeled in ancient human script so precise it looked machine-printed. Thousands of containers. Maybe more. The team spread out slowly, scanning in silence. Data was everywhere. History. Science. Records. Compressed into crystalline storage units that had survived 1,000,000 years without a single bite of corruption. But Sorvok was not looking at the containers. He was looking at the center of the vault. A raised platform. Stone steps leading up to it. And on top, a single object behind a barrier of thick clear material covered so densely in warning carvings that the surface was more text than transparency. A sphere. Black. Small enough to hold in one hand. Sitting alone in the middle of the platform. Humming. Sorvok raised his scanner. The device ran its analysis for 4 seconds. Then it displayed a result he had never seen in his entire career. Error. Unable to determine material composition. Unable to detect energy source. Unable to classify object. His scanner could analyze the molecular structure of a dying star. It could identify materials from civilizations 10 million years extinct. It had never once returned an error. He stared at the sphere. Then the vault woke up. Lights came on, soft, blue-white, sourceless, flooding the entire space instantly. A hum rose from the walls and floor together, steady and deep, like the vault was breathing for the first time in an age. And then a voice. Calm. Clear. Ancient. Playing from somewhere in the walls around them, a recording so perfectly preserved it sounded like the speaker was standing in the room. The translator worked for 3 long seconds. Then the words came through. You have entered the emergency vault of the Human Continuance Project. If you are not human, leave now. What is stored here was built as a last resort. It was never meant to be used. It was never meant to be found. If you are hearing this, something has gone wrong. A pause. Perfectly timed. As if the speaker had written it knowing how the silence would feel. Do not touch the sphere. Vril turned to look at Sorvok. He was already walking toward the platform. His steps were slow but they did not stop. They did not hesitate. His light moved with him across the vault floor, casting his shadow long and dark behind him against the rows of silent containers. And the sphere at the center of everything sat in its case behind its warnings and its barriers, small and black and humming, and waited for the hand that was already coming. Vril moved first. She crossed the vault floor in long fast strides and grabbed Sorvok by the arm, hard, with two hands, the way you grab someone who is about to step off a ledge they cannot see. He stopped walking. But he did not turn around. "Let go," he said. "You heard the recording," Vril said. Her voice was steady but her grip was not. It said, "Do not touch it." Those were the first words out of its mouth. Not a greeting. Not a welcome. A warning. The first thing it told us was a precaution, Sorvok said. A recorded message built 1,000,000 years ago for any species that might wander in. A blanket warning. It does not know who we are. It does not know what we are capable of. It was written for the unprepared. He turned then. Looked at her directly. His amber face was calm and his bright eyes carried that familiar certainty, the kind that did not leave room for doubt because it had already decided doubt was a waste of time. "We are prepared," he said. "We are the most advanced research team the Council has deployed in a century. We have the best equipment. The best minds. We did not come this far to stand at the edge and look." Vril held his arm for 3 more seconds. Then he pulled free. Gently but completely. And he walked toward the platform. She stood where she was and watched him go. Behind her, Breck and Hello exchanged a look, the silent conversation of 2 security officers who had just calculated their options and found none of them good. Dr. Pella had not moved from the vault entrance. She stood very still with her arms crossed and her eyes on the sphere and the expression of someone watching something they predicted a long time ago finally happen exactly the way they knew it would. Sorvok climbed the stone steps to the platform. Up close the barrier was even more covered in warnings than it had looked from below. The carvings were layered, some older, some newer, written at different times as if multiple people had come here over years and kept adding more. Kept feeling like what was already written was not enough. He pressed his palm flat against the barrier surface. It parted. No resistance. No mechanism. It simply separated where his hand touched it and folded back on both sides like something that had been waiting to be opened and was relieved to finally have permission. He reached in and picked up the sphere. It was lighter than it looked. Much lighter. Almost weightless in his palm. The surface was perfectly smooth and perfectly dark, not reflective, not matte, just dark in a way that seemed to pull at the light around it rather than simply absorb it. And it was warm. Not hot. Not uncomfortably warm. Just warm the way a living thing is warm. The humming intensified the moment his fingers closed around it. For 3 seconds nothing else happened. The vault was silent. Everyone was still. Even the lights seemed to pause, the soft blue-white glow holding steady, not flickering, not changing. Just waiting. Then the sphere cracked. A single line appeared across its surface, hairline thin, running from the top of the sphere to the bottom in a perfect arc. Then another line. Crossing the first. Then more, spreading outward from the center like ice fracturing from a single point of pressure, the cracks multiplying and branching until the entire surface was a web of fine lines. And then light poured out. Not from one crack. From all of them simultaneously. Blue and white and extraordinarily clean, not blinding, not harsh, but the kind of light that made everything it touched look more real than it had a moment before. Sharper. More present. The shadows in the vault pulled back. The rows of containers stood clearer. The ceiling, which no helmet light had been able to find, became briefly, impossibly visible. High and arched and carved with patterns so intricate they looked like a map of something too large to comprehend. The light gathered above Sorvok's hand. Concentrated. Took on weight and density that light should not have. And then it began to build a shape. Legs first. Then a body. Then arms, 2 of them, hanging at the sides, hands open and relaxed. Then a neck. Then a face. A human face. Vril had seen reconstructions in textbooks. Old artist interpretations based on fossil records and ancient descriptions. She had thought they looked strange, too symmetrical, too simple, 2 eyes and a flat nose and a mouth that always seemed slightly wrong in the drawings. The projection in front of her looked nothing like those drawings. It looked like a person. Tall, taller than she had expected, nearly 2 meters. Broad across the shoulders. The face was lined and tired and carried the particular weight of someone who had made decisions they could not unmake. The eyes, 2 of them, forward-facing, dark, moved across the room slowly and deliberately. They saw the containers. They saw the vault. They saw Pella at the entrance and Breck and Hello frozen near the wall and Vril standing at the base of the platform steps. And then they settled on Sorvok. The projection looked at him for a long moment. Not with anger. Not with alarm. With something quieter than both of those things. The look of someone who set something in motion a very long time ago and is now watching the final consequence of it arrive exactly on schedule. Then it spoke. The translator caught the words instantly this time, the vault's own system feeding directly into their suit receivers, bypassing the delay entirely. The voice was low and even and carried no drama. Just wait. You opened it, it said. Sorvok straightened slightly. We did, he said. Who are you? My name is not important, the projection said. I was one of the last humans to leave this galaxy. What I am is a recording, a message stored inside the sphere for the moment it was opened. I have been waiting a long time. Waiting for what? Sorvok asked. For this, it said simply. For someone to do exactly what you just did. Pella spoke from the entrance. Her voice was tight. What is the sphere? The recording told us not to touch it. What does it do? The projection turned toward her. Something in its expression shifted slightly, a recognition, maybe. As if the question came from someone who already understood part of the answer. The sphere is not a weapon, it said. It is not a tool. It is not a data storage device. It paused. It is a key. The word landed in the vault like a stone into deep water. Vril felt the ripple of it move through her. A key to what? Sorvok asked. The projection looked at him. The tired eyes held something that took Vril a moment to identify, because it was the last thing she expected to see in the face of a being from a civilization 1,000,000 years gone. Grief. To us, it said quietly. The sphere is a signal device. A beacon. It was built to broadcast one specific transmission the moment it was opened, a transmission powerful enough to reach anywhere in this galaxy and beyond it. A transmission that carries one message. It looked down at the sphere in Sorvok's hand. The cracks in its surface were still glowing, fainter now, the light beginning to fade as if the energy inside was emptying out. We are coming home, the projection said. The sphere pulsed. Once. Hard. A single beat like a massive heart firing for the first time after a long stillness. The pulse moved outward through the vault walls and through the asteroid and out into open space, invisible, silent, traveling at a speed that made light feel slow. Moving in every direction simultaneously. A wave that would touch every corner of the known galaxy and keep going past the edges of it into the dark beyond. The ship's instruments registered it instantly. Captain Doss, watching from the bridge, saw every sensor on the endless inquiry spike at once. The long-range arrays lit up. The communication systems fired automatically, not transmitting, receiving. The signal was already bouncing back from relay points across the galaxy as every long-range sensor network in known space picked up the pulse and began tracking it. His communications officer turned from her station with wide eyes. Captain, she said. The signal is structured. The AI is translating it now. DOS gripped the edge of the console. The translation appeared on the main screen. 7 words. Simple. Clear. Impossible. This is emergency signal Omega. Continuance protocol active. And below that, the line that made DOS sit down slowly in his captain's chair and stare at the screen without blinking. We are coming home. Back in the vault, the projection was already beginning to fade. The light pulling back into itself, the shape becoming less solid, the edges dissolving into the blue-white glow that had built it. Sorvok looked down at the sphere in his hand. It was dark now. Cold. The cracks were sealed. The hum was gone. It felt like holding a stone, ordinary, empty, spent. What happens now? He asked. His voice had changed. For the first time since Vril had known him, the certainty was gone. Replaced by something smaller. Something honest. The projection was almost invisible now. Just an outline. Just a suggestion of a shape and a face. But the voice came through clearly. One last time. Now, it said, you wait. And you hope, it added, that the galaxy you built in our absence is something worth coming back to. Then the light was gone. The vault stood around them, enormous, silent, full of the records of a civilization that had hidden itself from the universe and left one last door open for the moment the universe finally needed it back. Sorvok stood on the platform with an empty sphere in his hand. And somewhere unimaginably far away, past the edge of the mapped galaxy, past the reach of every telescope and sensor array that had ever been built, something registered the signal. And began to move. The galaxy did not take the news well. Within 11 minutes of the signal firing, the Galactic Council's emergency communication network lit up from one end of known space to the other. Automated relay stations that had sat dormant for decades activated simultaneously, their systems detecting the pulse and flagging it at the highest possible priority level. A level most living council members had never seen triggered before. A level that had no official name. Just a color, red, deep, unblinking red on every screen in every council chamber on every inhabited world that received the signal. Captain DOS sat in his chair on the bridge of the endless inquiry and watched his communication board fill up with incoming transmissions faster than his officer could sort them. Governments. Military commands. Research institutions. Private entities with enough political weight to access emergency frequencies. All of them asking the same question in different languages with different levels of panic layered underneath. What did you find? What did you do? What is coming? DOS did not answer any of them. Not yet. He sat quietly and watched the board fill and thought about the old captain's rule he had followed for 200 years, never speak until you understand what you are saying. He did not understand any of this yet, that he was not sure understanding was possible. Yet in the vault, nobody had moved. The team stood in the blue-white light among the silent rows of containers and the empty platform and the spent sphere in Sorvok's hand. The projection was gone. The voice was gone. The hum was gone. What remained was just space, enormous and still and full of the particular quiet that follows something that cannot be taken back. Vril was the first to speak. We need to leave, she said. Nobody argued. Not even Sorvok. They moved back through the vault and into the corridor in single file. The warning carvings on the walls caught their helmet lights as they passed. Do not open, turn back. This is mercy, and this time the words did not feel like ancient caution. They felt like instructions that someone had written with full knowledge of this exact moment. This exact walk back through the dark with the weight of what just happened sitting on every set of shoulders. They boarded the ship in silence. Removed their suits in silence. Went to their stations or their rooms or simply stood in the corridors because they did not know where else to go. Dr. Pella went back to the research bay. She sat at the table covered in her 40 years of work and looked at it all, the photographs, the maps, the notes, the fragments, and for a long time she did not touch any of it. She just looked. Then she began to write. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session 6 hours after the signal. DOS was patched in via long-range communication, seated alone on the bridge with the main screen filled by the faces of 12 council members broadcasting from different worlds simultaneously. They asked him to explain what happened. He explained it. All of it, from Vriel's first ping to the corridor to the door to the sphere to the projection and the signal. He spoke for 40 minutes without stopping. The council members listened without interrupting, which told him more about how seriously they were taking this than anything else. In 200 years he had never once addressed the council without being interrupted. When he finished, the chamber was silent. Then the eldest council member, a Vethani so old her skin had turned almost translucent, leaned forward and asked the question every civilization in the galaxy was already asking in every language they had. Are they hostile? Dawes thought about the projection's tired eyes. The grief in them. The weight. I do not think so, he said honestly. But I do not think that is the right question. The Vethani council member tilted her head. Then what is? Dawes looked at his hands for a moment. Then back at the screen. The right question, he said, is whether we deserve to not be afraid of them. The chamber stayed silent for a long time after that. Sorvok did not attend any briefings that day. He did not file his initial report. He did not respond to the 6 direct messages from the Council's Science Division asking for his first-hand account. He sat in his quarters with the spent sphere on the desk in front of him and stared at it. He was not a person who regretted things. He had built his career on forward movement, on the certainty that knowledge was always worth the cost of finding it and that hesitation was just fear wearing a reasonable face. He had walked into that vault with that belief fully intact. He was not sure what he believed now. The sphere sat on the desk. Dark and cold and ordinary looking. Something you could find on any beach on any world, a smooth black stone worn round by time. Nobody who had not been in that vault would look at it and understand what it had done. What it had started. What it had called across the dark between galaxies. Sorvok picked it up. Turned it over in his hands. The cracks were still there, sealed now, barely visible, thin as spider silk. He ran his thumb along one of them. He thought about the projection's last words. You hope that the galaxy you built in our absence is something worth coming back to. He set the sphere back down carefully. He did not know the answer to that. He suspected nobody did. The galaxy had been built over 900,000 years by civilizations that thought they were building it for themselves, their futures, their children, their empires. None of them had known they were also building it for an audience. For a judgment. For a homecoming. 3 weeks after the signal, the first anomaly appeared. A deep space monitoring station near the galaxy's outer edge reported an unusual gravitational reading. Not large. Not alarming on its own. The kind of reading that got logged and reviewed and usually explained as a rogue mass or a drifting object or a sensor error. Except this reading moved. It moved with direction and purpose and at a speed that the station's senior analyst stared at for a full hour before she filed the report, because she needed that hour to convince herself she was reading the instruments correctly. She filed the report. Flagged it urgent. Attached her calculations. The reading was not one object. It was thousands. Spread across a front so wide it covered more space than most mapped star systems. Moving together. Moving inward. Moving toward the galaxy's center at a rate that, if maintained, would bring them to the inner systems within a generation. The report reached the Council within hours. From the Council it spread to every government with access to the emergency frequency. From there it moved the way only truly significant things move, past official channels and into the general population. Into the streets and the markets and the schools and the small quiet homes on 1,000 worlds where ordinary people looked up from their ordinary lives and heard the news and went still. Humanity was coming home. Not as a story. Not as a signal. As a reality. As a presence. As something that was no longer abstract and historical and safely distant but concrete and moving and getting closer with every passing day. On the endless inquiry, Vril stood at the observation window in the forward section of the ship. The asteroid was still visible from here, drifting in its slow circle around the dead star, covered in its warnings, the door inside it open now and staying open. The vault lights visible as a faint glow through the entry tunnel the team had cut. Dr. Pella came and stood beside her. They were quiet together for a while. The comfortable quiet of two people who have been through the same thing and do not need to describe it to each other. "Are you afraid?" Vril asked eventually. Pella considered the question seriously. She did not answer quickly. That was one of the things Vril had come to respect about her. She did not give easy answers to hard questions just to fill the silence. "Yes," Pella said finally. "But not of them." Vril looked at her. "Then of what?" Pella kept her eyes on the asteroid. On the faint glow of the open vault. On the dead star turning slowly in the dark beyond it. "Of the moment they arrive," she said quietly, "and look at what we have done with the galaxy they left behind. And we have to stand there and watch their faces while they decide what they think of us." Vril turned back to the window. Outside, the dead star system drifted in its ancient silence. The asteroid turned. The vault glowed. And somewhere past the edge of everything mapped and known and named, something vast and patient and human moved through the dark between galaxies. Coming back to a home they had left 1,000,000 years ago. Coming back to see what had grown in their absence. Coming back, and nobody in the galaxy, on any world, in any government or council chamber or quiet home under any sky, could say with certainty whether that was the most wonderful thing that had ever happened. Or the beginning of something nobody was ready for. The stars did not answer. They never did. They just burned. And waited.